Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced may be one of the best titles Ubisoft has released in years, and I know that may be a bold statement to say about a Ubisoft title in 2026, but after spending 30 plus hours experiencing a completely different world than I've ever been accustomed to from a Ubisoft title, sailing the seas, facing off against armadas of Spanish and English naval fleet, sneaking and fighting through the jungles of the Caribbean, and experiencing one of the most intriguing stories in the series, it reminds me why this franchise became one of Ubisoft's biggest success in the first place. What's up guys, my name is Fervor, welcome back to the channel, and after going hands-on ahead of launch, this is my complete review of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced.
Would be nice.
You'll have to do better than that.
Alright, here's the TLDR. Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced is a full-fledged return to form, and I know that makes people a little bit uneasy to hear, because that's the kind of talk you hear when a company is trying to sell you nostalgia, and while Assassin's Creed Black Flag definitely has that element of nostalgia, I genuinely felt like I was playing a completely unique experience compared to what we've seen in the last couple of years. And what I mean by this is the previous 3 or so Assassin's Creed title has been what I called a very bloated experience, a massive open world with tons of copy-pasted points of interest and essentially 50 hours of doing repetitive content that didn't really benefit the main core gameplay loop. With Black Flag Resynced, that is not really the case, and to help you understand, we must talk about the main draw of the game, and that is being a pirate. Let me be the first to say I am not someone who really enjoyed pirate gameplay. In a lot of games, I always found the mechanics to be pretty shallow and not fully developed, but with Black Flag Resynced, the piracy is easily one of the best draws of the entire experience. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the side activities in recent Ubisoft titles have often felt bloated, like they existed more to fill out the world rather than add meaningful gameplay. But with this game, I found myself actually spending a surprising amount of time away from the main story quest because the piracy itself was actually enjoyable. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that the main story wasn't very interesting, but the freedom of exploring the sea, engaging with fleets, and building your influence as a pirate felt like one of the strongest parts of the entire game. You start off extremely simple. Through story beats, you are able to acquire the Jackdaw, an iconic vessel we've grown to love, and from there you set out to expand your influence across the Caribbean. You begin by navigating the simpler waters controlled by either Spanish or English naval fleet, searching for opportunities to gather resources and upgrade your ship. Now this gameplay loop is already fun on its own because every encounter feels like it requires some level of strategy. If you see an armada of Spanish fleets engaging in battle, you're probably in a pretty bad position, but finding the right opportunity to single out a brig or a schooner can be the difference between gaining enough resources to upgrade your ship or improve your base, or continue expanding your empire. What makes the piracy gameplay so interesting is that you're not just mindlessly attacking every ship you come across. The Caribbean is filled with different threats that you have to pay attention to. As you move into certain regions, you'll encounter much stronger fleets. Even though this isn't an Assassin's Creed game, which is typically easier than most titles, you can't simply run in and overpower everything. You have to think about the fights you take, you have to understand when to engage, when to retreat, and sometimes even look for opportunities where fleets are already fighting each other so you can take advantage of the situation. If I'm being honest, this is one of the more unique gameplay systems I experienced in a while, and for a Ubisoft title, this is not a gameplay loop that I personally expected to enjoy this much. The idea that I can actually step away from the main story, focus on the side activity, and still feel like it was meaningfully progressing my character in the world was actually genuinely refreshing. In addition to that, there's the forts. These are strategic locations scattered across the map that opens up additional opportunities once captured. Once you take down the defenses and eventually storm the castle, you'll gain access to an entire zone where you can eventually send your fleet out through the fleet management menu and continue to expand your influence throughout the region. The great thing about these forts is they aren't just like these activities where you walk in and destroy everything without much thought. These are actual challenge behind them. You have to consider the ships defending them, deal with reinforcements, determine whether you're actually have enough firepower to take one down. Of course, successfully capturing a fort rewards you with major benefits, including like new trade routes, additional piracy opportunities, and further expansion through the region, but the point is, it's not just handed to you, which makes this way more of a refreshing experience. On top of that, these ship upgrades are actually pretty extremely impactful. They include things like mortar upgrades, which are incredibly useful during sieging forts, side cannon updates that can completely change the outcome of a battle against stronger vessels, and eventually special upgrades that allow you to take on some of the most legendary targets in the entire game. All of this combined with roaming convoys that provide valuable rewards, base systems that actually benefit your progression, and the ability to hunt down legendary ships Great experience that felt genuinely fun and most importantly, refreshing for a Assassin's Creed title. If I'm being completely honest, this is the first time in the last half decade where I can confidently say that the side activities actually mattered. They weren't just filler content added to make the game longer, they felt meaningful and they felt rewarding, and that supports the overall gameplay loop. Now that's not to say that some of the activities aren't copy-pasted, nonsensical things, but for the most part, when you're actually engaging with the in-game systems and the piracy system specifically, there's actual genuine progression that keeps you invested. You're not just walking all over everything, there's actual strategy behind it. That's something important to keep in mind when jumping into this game. It can be simple at times, but it works because everything feels cohesive. And considering the direction the series have taken in recent years, that simplicity is exactly what makes it stand out. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I never had the opportunity to jump into the original Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I briefly played it for a few hours, but to be quite frank, during that time, I wasn't really the kind of player who cared about Assassin's Creed style games. But fast forward to over a decade later, I have to say, after experiencing so many stories, so many characters, and so many different worlds, the story of Edward is quite different. Keep in mind, this is a spoiler-free review, so I won't be going into any major details. Overall, I will say that jumping in and seeing the series of events that play out in this game was not only nostalgic, but genuinely interesting. In past games, I never really cared to stop and listen to dialogue before, but I actually found myself paying attention to every conversation just to see how the story would actually go. And again, while I never played the original in its entirety, from what I can tell, the core story remains intact, with some additional expansions to the overall experience. I'm not going to try to sell you on the idea that I am a story-focused player. If you've watched me over the years, you know I don't really care about story. But if you are a fan of the original story, I can't really see a reason why you wouldn't enjoy what Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced brings to the table. Another interesting part of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced has been the combat. Now, I've drawn this comparison a lot, but the previous 3 Assassin's Creed titles, despite their flaws, have made some pretty significant improvements to combat over the years. So with Resynced, it does feel like the team wanted to keep the gameplay closer to what made the original so special while still adding some much needed improvements. So keep in mind when you are playing Resynced, don't expect Valhalla, Shadows, or Mirage level combat options. The way you unlock combat abilities is primarily through the story progression, with a large portion of the upgrades coming from improving your ship, your equipment, and your overall stat. That's not to say that they haven't improved the combat, because it's no longer as simple as it once was. There are parries, timing-based mechanics, and opportunities to use special attacks depending on the enemies you're facing, but generally speaking, the hand-to-hand combat feels much more grounded and closer to the older Assassin's Creed titles rather than the more newer RPG focused entries. Now, I know some players may not necessarily prefer this style, and I think it works extremely well because it keeps the game authentic to what made the original Black Flag special while still adding some much needed improvement. And to me, that's actually a massive positive. Not everything needs to have these in-depth RPG systems. You can preserve what actually made the game special, and I think they did a good job. Keep in mind, there are still progression systems available, such as upgrading your pouches, unlocking and purchasing new weapons, and expanding your character through like gear options. You can acquire equipment through your home base by exploring the world, unlocking chests, or purchasing items from vendors in major cities. So there is still a level of customization, crafting, and character progression, but expect the majority of your customization to be focused around your ship rather than your character. Finally, let's address one of the biggest concerns I've seen come up recently, and that is the tailing missions and the overall stealth systems. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. After completing every part of the main story quest, although I've not completed every single side quest, I've not failed a single tailing mission from what I can tell, and they seem to be completely fine by modern day standards. During some of these missions, I was actively watching Twitch or looking at like some Mecha Chameleon or something on the second monitor, and even while paying half attention, I still never failed a single one. So as far as the tailing missions go, they don't really seem to have an issue anymore. I think a major reason for that is because stealth has improved pretty drastically compared to what they were in Black Flag when they originally released. By modern stealth standards, I would say it's about average. The AI isn't anything revolutionary or overly intelligent, but it follows the standard Ubisoft stealth formula, and it works completely fine. I do want to point out though, there isn't an expert stealth mode option within the game. There's actually multiple settings that allow you to adjust things like difficulty, AI behavior, and other gameplay elements. So if you're looking for a much more challenging stealth experience, the option is actually available to you. But from a standard difficulty perspective, the stealth is probably around what you expect from an Assassin's Creed title. Considering where it started, I think this is a pretty significant improvement. So guys, there you have it. That is my full review of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. I want to say, as someone who never really gave the original game a proper chance, Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced has been such a unique experience because it's a completely different approach to the standard Assassin's Creed formula, and I think it works really well. Personally, I think the game is worth checking out, especially if you enjoyed the original, because pound for pound, it expands on what makes Black Flag so good while adding even more to the experience. Hopefully this review gave you an idea of whether Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced is worth investing into. With that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about Resynced? Are you planning on picking it up, or are you still a little bit reserved? If you have any questions, of course, let me know down in the comments and I'll try to answer it. And of course, if you appreciate the work that goes into these videos, consider leaving a like, or better yet, subscribing for more Assassin's Creed coverage, because we do have a lot coming on the channel. With that said, thank you all for being here. My name is Fervor, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video very soon.